Hello and welcome to episode 11 of the Verbal to Visual podcast. I'm your host, Doug Neal, and on this show, you get to hear coaching calls that I have with folks who are developing and using their sketchnoting skills. Today, I'm chatting with Suzanne Jewell about the entire process of creating an online course. This episode is a bit longer than usual, but we dig into a lot of interesting topics. And the timing of this conversation works out really well because I'm in the middle of creating a new online course right now, a course called Digital Sketchnoting that Suzanne is a part of. So it feels like a good time to kind of lay out the entire process. And Suzanne does a really good job of identifying questions to fill in all of the gaps that you might also be interested in filling yourself if you too are thinking about taking your expertise and creating a transformative online experience for others. You can find the show notes for today's episode at verbaltovisual.com/11. Let's get into it.
And I did want to thank you, first of all, for the class. It has been phenomenal. You are
I'm
an amazing instructor.
I'm
Really
so
Italian
glad to hear that.
experience.
Glad you're
Yep.
enjoying it.
I have a fair amount of experience teaching, and you just, set up why are we talking about this really well, and then go through and talk about it, and then wrap it up nicely. So it's a really nice structure.
Oh,
And
well,
the
thank you.
course,
I
both
appreciate that.
both for individual classes, but also the course as a whole.
Hmm.
I'm just going, okay, I got to up my game here.
Well, it's been fun. Like I feel like this has been probably the most interesting um, format for developing and for sharing the course. I have tended to do this course development in kind of an iterative process for previous courses as well, in terms of, getting folks in the door early, making things and sharing lessons early on before kind of producing like the final formal videos.
Uh-huh.
But I feel like with this one, I don't know, with Mighty Networks and with the interaction and with Zoom now, just the level of interaction with students and folks like you who are taking the course and engaging in it in what feels like maybe a deeper way than in the past, that has made it just feel, I don't know, just feel a little bit different. And there's just a different energy to this one than
Uh-huh.
maybe previous courses, which has been fun to see.
So say a little more about that. I'd love to hear it. How have you done it in the past when you've iterated for course development?
Yeah. So what I tend to do when I come, so first of all, even just like selecting the course topic, I kind of look for this intersection of a topic that I personally am very interested in exploring and want to spend a lot of time with. But then also it's a topic that intersects with kind of the audience of verbal to visual that other folks want to engage with as well. So for this most recent one, it was pretty clear that like I hadn't done a deep dive into digital sketchnoting, like using a tablet and a particular note-taking app. So I was pretty confident in that as a topic of a course. But then the first stage, I tend to launch early before I have, fully developed even necessarily like an outline or a roadmap. What I launch with is the overarching question or the overarching transformation that I hope the course provides. So within digital sketchnoting, as you've seen, the goal is to help students, identify both the hardware if they don't have a tablet already, and then the software, give a sense for the apps that are out there. But almost more important than the software is like how to use it. So basically how to use the features that digital sketchnoting provides to create this sketchnoting process specific to that digital tool set that is in alignment with the big picture goal that you've defined for yourself. So that's kind of the overarching purpose of this course, is to help students get comfortable with the digital tool set and develop a process that help folks work toward that particular goal. Um, so after identifying that transformation, um, I usually kick things off either with a survey that's sent out to, like, right when people sign up for the course, or as we did with digital sketchnoting, like a kickoff webinar where we all get together and folks have the chance to ask whatever questions they have about digital sketchnoting,
Mhm.
and even just like opening it up for to identify the big questions. That gives you as the instructor a sense for, okay, these are the things that like people are really curious about, and these are the questions they want to have answered throughout this course. And by gathering, it doesn't even have to be like a huge number of people, um, anywhere from like 10 to 20 folks. By giving each of those people the opportunity to ask their kind of biggest questions about digital sketchnoting, that total set of questions, I think, gives you a good sense for the topics that you would then like to address throughout the course. Um, so that's kind of the starting point. I could keep going in the process if you want, but
Yeah.
I'll
Well,
pause to hear your reaction, Suzanne.
yeah, let me just make sure I get you clearly. So when you're trying to find a new course, you're looking at, what do you want to learn about or talk about,
Mm-hmm.
and what is there a need for a market for out there? What are people interested in wanting to learn? And
Yes,
and then you start by focusing on, well, what's that need that people have? What is the change in their lives they're looking for, or they need?
absolutely. Yep, that's a transformation piece.
The transformation, yep. And then you say, okay, I've identified this, but then I do some good user research and say, okay, well, let me talk to some people and find out what are the pain points or the challenges they have in this area, through either
Yes.
do you do an online survey if you do a survey?
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, I think in the past I've just used like Google Forms.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Or you do a webinar and gather people. Cool.
Yeah.
So then you figured out, okay, here are the big questions. So this starts into your course design.
Yeah. So once you have that set of questions, um, and I should also mention too what's helpful about those surveys and the webinar, in addition to identifying those questions that folks have, I also include a spot on the form or kick off that webinar, um, giving each person the opportunity to share kind of the specific thing that they want to use their digital sketchnoting skills for. So that piece of being able to see a handful of concrete examples of the goal that they're working toward, and even like a little bit about their situation, like the context in which they work, and um, some of those sorts of details are helpful to keep in mind throughout the development process, uh, because that can kind of like, it makes it easier for me to put myself in the shoes of someone taking the course, when I can think of like, um, okay, I know, for example, like from our digital sketchnoting course, I know Caroline Isabel is a university professor. She's going to be teaching online in the fall and has like 3 or 4 courses that she wants to record. And that's what she's using her digital sketchnoting for. And like Raj, he's doing these cool kind of like one pagers of often kind of business related or technology related topics, to be able to share like with his colleagues at work. So having those kind of like concrete examples and specific people to think of, um, it adds both, I think, like some motivation when developing the course, knowing that there are like real people out there
Mhm.
who are going to be using the resources that you create, and being able to think about their specific context to make sure that what you create kind of meets their needs. Um, so that is another thing that is helpful to include within that initial survey or the webinar chat. Um, and yeah, after you get a bunch of those survey responses, or after that webinar takes place, then it's the, I guess, core of the curriculum development process. Um, and there are a handful of techniques that I've used to kind of fill in all of the gaps between the defined starting point and defined end point of the transformation that you want to take folks through. Are you familiar with? I've shared some videos before. One about the clothesline technique, another
Mhm.
called the shoebox method. Have you seen either of those, Suzanne?
I saw them yes, well, you talked about them in a couple of weeks ago
That's right. Yeah, I mentioned them within digital
and
sketchnoting.
illustrated them. Yep.
Yeah, so those are just a couple of examples of like, um, as you're capturing like potential lesson ideas and potential unit structures. So like getting a bit at the hierarchy, like what are the 3 to 5 big units you might want to take folks through, and what are the lessons within each of those units, um, and like what activities might you want to include within each of those lessons, having some sort of structure to organize those ideas as they come. So that's what the clothesline technique is. Um, that comes from Stephen Pressfield, just to catch up folks listening if they're not familiar with
Right.
it.
You want to take a
You could
minute
use
and
a,
describe them a little bit? Because they are both chunking ways of chunking stuff.
yeah, yeah. So with the clothesline technique, you can like imagine a literal like line hung up across the room if you wanted, and you can use clothespins to attach big sheets of paper with maybe the unit ideas that you have. Um, but the idea is that these systems are modular, so that you have the opportunity to rearrange. Oh, maybe this unit should go before this one, or this lesson should go over here instead of over there. Um, so they're both organization techniques to uh, help with the sequencing in particular. Um, and with the clothesline, like it would probably be impractical to actually use some kind of a line with clothespins. If you're going to go with that approach, I like using a wall and then like blue painter's tape. Or if you're into digital sketchnoting, maybe a app like Concepts or Miro, where you've got like a big canvas where you can get individual ideas down, but then still like move them around as you're kind of determining the sequencing of each of them. Um, Shoebox method is a similar idea where you just use index cards as the individual chunks where you put unit ideas down and lesson ideas down. And there's kind of a shoeboxed size box, but that's kind of specific for index cards, where you can kind of keep track of the order of the way you might introduce those ideas. So those types of techniques, I get the whole purpose there is to allow for you to kind of get ideas down quickly, like in the brainstorming phase, and um, organize them as you go without having necessarily to like start from lesson 1.1 then go to 1.2 then 1.3. Like you don't have to like build them in order when you're brainstorming. You can just get them down as they come and like put each in its place as it comes to mind.
So you're taking here's the just to recap, make sure I'm clear. You figure out here's where people are starting, here's where we'd like them to wind up. How do we break down the transition into some big pieces? And you're using some brainstorming techniques to get that out visually whether it's using a linear clothesline type metaphor, putting it all out and laying it out in sequence, or shoebox, that's more of a grid, but you're dropping things out, getting it out of your head, on the wall, on the screen, so that you can rearrange and see how it fits together.
Absolutely, yeah. And what's helpful about those, both like a wall and a big uh, canvas within an app that you might be using, is that it makes it easy to zoom in and out between like the idea within a specific lesson if you want to go to that level of detail, or you can step back away from the wall or zoom out on your canvas to remind yourself of the big picture flow of the entire course. So that zooming in and out during the brainstorming process can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm. So then
Um,
how do you get to actual lessons and content and recording?
yeah. So there usually comes a point when that clothesline feels full enough. Like you've got all of the units down. There are enough lessons within each of those units where I think I provide the suggestion, you don't need to feel 100% or even like 90% confident in all of the details at that stage. Just get to maybe like 80% good about the fullness of that trajectory and
I say apply the 80-20 rule. We've got 80, let's
exactly,
go.
exactly. And from that stage, that's typically when uh, I guess within digital sketchnoting, at least that could be a good time to maybe sketch out a course roadmap and like share that roadmap with maybe the folks who took the survey or took part in a kickoff webinar. That's an opportunity for some feedback from the folks who maybe already signed up for your course. That's helpful just to give folks an opportunity to see what you plan to explore, and for folks to be able to point out like, oh, what about this thing, this topic would be really helpful to address maybe at this point within your course roadmap.
Mhm.
um, so just a little bit of feedback there might help just to identify potential gaps that you might have missed.
Do you
um,
find at that point, getting feedback at that point, that from prospective students, how hard is it to frame things so they actually understand what you're talking about? They haven't taken the class yet, so you're going to be talking about some concepts that they might not be familiar with. How do
yeah.
you have problems with or struggle? How do you get it formulated so you can get useful feedback? They actually understand enough.
Right, right. I guess thinking back through the topics that I've explored in the courses I've created, like we did this with digital sketchnoting, and if I look back to the roadmap that I proposed, I think all of the pieces to that roadmap. Uh, Essentially there's some form with that one. I actually made a short little video where I like walked folks through the roadmap. So with each lesson I gave a short paragraph description, maybe, or it might have even just been like a sentence or two description of each of those lessons. And I feel like that's the opportunity to even if you don't explore that topic in depth, right? Like with that description, give folks enough of a sense for what that topic is and how it's connected to the overall transformation. Um, yeah, so I mean, with digital sketchnoting, these are things like pens and brushes, canvas size, layers, zooming in and out. So with that one, like
Mhm.
folks who sign up for digital sketchnoting are already familiar enough with those concepts. Like they know
Uh-huh.
what they are, but they might not yet know what like their approach to using those.
Uh-huh.
Do you have an example of what potentially more abstract or uh, concepts that students aren't familiar with that you might be weaving into your course?
So the course I'm trying to transfer, I do a Sketch app class, and Sketch app is a vector-based wireframing program for UX designers.
Mm,
So very much in the same space, but I'm using my mouse and using objects to draw around. I'm not drawing with a pen
right.
because I'm wireframing out screens or doing mock-ups of potential screens. Um, and the Sketch, there's a concept, something called symbols, which is a reusable objects that is
Mm,
very core to reusability in Sketch, so that I can define an object and use it all over, modify the original, and it gets propagated through. But if I just say we'll talk about symbols and people
mm,
don't know Sketch, it's like, well, I've heard of them.
right. Well, so even like what you just did, you described in, I think, one sentence or a couple of sentences to me, like what symbols mean within the context of uh, the sketch. What's it called again? Sketch.
Sketch.
Okay, yeah, it's just called Sketch. Within like that tool. So
Yeah.
what I think what you the way in which you just described it is enough level of detail when going through a course roadmap. Uh, Even
Yeah.
though like the folks won't fully understand what it means until they see it and know how to use it, but they're like, okay, I kind of get why that type of thing will be useful.
Yeah, and I think what it is when you have talked about in the digital sketchnoting, you have a piece that is your applications of digital sketchnoting, and you go through and talk about I forget where you started, but it's storytelling, problem solving,
Mhm.
and there's one other that escapes me right now.
Yeah,
Um,
learning is the third one there.
what is it?
Learning,
Learning,
using it as a
yes,
learning tool.
learning
Yeah.
tool. And what you're doing by doing that is talking about what problem does this solve?
Mhm.
So, and I think that's my description of symbols was just reusability.
Mm,
This is
yeah,
the problem that it solves for you.
that's great.
Framing it
And
that way. Yeah.
yeah, and that could be a helpful structure or format with each of the lessons you describe. Like,
Mhm.
here's what this lesson is, and here's the problem that it solves.
Which is what you do actually often. I don't know if you realize this when you start off. Here's what'll
Yeah,
do for you.
right,
Do with
right.
this. That's
Yeah, that's a great way to come at it, just because it yeah puts the focus on the right thing. I think for folks coming in and uh, when folks watching identify like yes, like I see that problem, I've experienced that problem, so
yeah,
I'm excited now to like learn how to solve it or work
yeah,
through it or around it.
right. It's going back to why. Why are we talking
Yeah,
about this?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I know why. I want to hear this now.
Exactly, yeah, getting that little bit of kind of like
So you sketch out your roadmap. You get some again. Go back to market research. Get some feedback.
yeah, and then with that feedback you might make a few tweaks to that roadmap, but chances are it's not going to be like a major overhaul because of the kind of work you had done previously in putting that roadmap together. And from there, going into the more detailed lesson planning. So using your clothesline, I guess we could just keep using that one as our reference point. You've got a bunch of details there about the lessons that you want to include. Now is when you actually create them using whatever you know your delivery, whatever you plan to um, create for your course lessons, whether you're recording pen and paper videos or doing a maybe some animation within Keynote or recording your screen within an app. Um, so I should step back and say you're not actually recording them yet, but you're kind of working in that environment to actually sketch out the details of what's going to go on each page for that given lesson. Um, so I feel like the way I've described this within Build an Online Course with sketch notes. Uh, for each lesson, it's kind of this layering down of what you already did for the course as a whole. For each lesson, identifying, okay, what's the point of this lesson? Um, what's the visual structure of this lesson? And what's the follow-up student action? I think those are the three questions to answer for each individual lesson. And likely, most of those pieces probably already live on your brainstorming wall, but kind of making sure to explicitly identify each of those three pieces. That's how I kind of transition from a brainstorming wall to the draft of a specific lesson.
And
Do
you're
those three
doing that
questions make
directly
sense?
in your delivery medium. You're laying out your the structure of your lesson. What is the point we want to do? How am I going to structure it visually, and what is the call to action? What's the follow up that you want students to do to get it home? Because you're working in visual medium, and that's going to be your media, and that's going to be your delivery mechanism. You do that planning directly in your end environment.
Yes, that's what I tend to do.
Hmm.
So I think when I was doing this with digital sketchnoting, um, I did this all within Procreate. So I think I had a different, it was even just one Procreate project, and I had a different layer for each lesson. And I started off, I think, a fairly consistent method I used. I think like on the in the upper left of the screen, I had a small rectangle for like what's the point of this lesson. That was kind of in the upper left, and then in the lower right, it's like what's the student follow up action.
Mm.
Uh, and I think I tended to identify those two pieces first, just because I think it is helpful to have the student follow up action in mind as you're deciding like okay what's the visual structure, how do I want to share these ideas to facilitate that most important step of students actually doing something with the ideas that you just shared. um, so with the point in the upper left, the follow-up action in the lower right, then I like fill the bulk of the screen, the bulk of the canvas with the visual structure of the lesson. um, and I don't the and it's the part in the middle. It might just be the part in the middle that actually um, I end up recording for the lesson itself. Um, Depending on the nature of it, uh, you may or may not want to include the specific point or follow up question there within the lesson. You might add that in, like, um, if there's some sort of a uh, recap page where this lesson lives, depending on how you're delivering it, you can choose, whether or not you want the point and follow up action to be there within the lesson itself, if that makes sense.
Mhm. I think what you're describing here is an incredible use for sketchnoting for any kind of planning,
Mm,
specific lesson planning, even if I'm not going to give the lesson in using the sketchnoting format. If
yeah.
I'm doing something that I'm going, most of the time, most of us sit and do outlines, try to do it on outlines. I have worked with keynote kind of structures like that. This strikes me as much more powerful for the even just for the planning, even if students will never see this sketch note, this note.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that format being
I think
helpful.
there's another application for you to talk about. It's just planning.
Right, right. Well, I mean, that kind of speaks to um, something that I feel like all uh, sketchnoters or visual thinkers might consider is I find it fun just to like make templates that other folks might find useful. So I think what I was describing there was like that's a visual template for lesson planning
Right.
that teachers could use whether or not they want to include sketchnoting in their lessons, like you mentioned.
Hmm.
And I think what's cool about sketchnoting and visual thinking in general is that most folks who come to this field already have, background knowledge in their, career, and they've got this large amount of knowledge that they're bringing in and thinking about. It's like, oh, well, based on your knowledge and the work that you do, you could probably create some templates that would help your colleagues do their work better or more efficiently. So that's just another thing for sketchnoters in general, to think about. But then also instructors, right? Like you might want to create templates that help folks use Sketch in a particular way.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, that's a
Yeah, and I think
fun road to go down.
for as a scaffolding mechanism in learning, yeah, I don't, you're familiar with the concept of scaffolding,
Yeah.
training wheels, kind of helping people as they're learning. Those templates you gave in the beginning of the digital sketchnoting class were really helpful
Mm,
for someone like myself who's, total novice, going, okay, let's focus. It lets me focus on certain parts and without having to create the whole thing from scratch. So as I'm
yeah.
learning, it gives me a frame, like zoom, magnification. Okay, this is how much space I've got. I don't have to plan that. I can focus on the content for a bit here.
Mhm.
So those
Yes.
are really powerful, and I think for you to produce some more of those, I'm not sure what your process is for releasing those, but um, advanced sketch can create them for others. I'm in the create them for me, please category.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. Uh, yeah, and it's interesting too. I feel like, um, even the creation of those templates, uh, it, it's been interesting while developing this course, digital sketchnoting. As we've moved from one unit to the next, I've used a different app for the lesson delivery. And I found that I think when I was using Procreate, so the first two apps that I used Procreate for the first unit, and then GoodNotes for the second unit, and then Concepts for the third. And I noticed that once I moved to Concepts, which is this, kind of infinite canvas app, I made these big mind maps. I feel like I kind of went away from the creation of templates.
Mm,
Whereas when I was using Procreate and GoodNotes, something about like the lesson delivery format that I chose, I think lent itself more to the creation of those templates, um, more so than once I switched to this like infinite canvas mind map. Um, so that was just an interesting thing that came to mind, uh, where the lesson delivery tool, might affect the follow-up resources that you create for your students, maybe in a positive way, maybe like in a negative way. Just something to think about there.
and that's an interesting point. I've been starting to play with concepts because I miss that having vectors and layers and zoom and all that, and having I have a very strong background in zooming user interfaces, and
Mm,
it concepts drives me crazy because the navigation is so poor. All you
mm,
can do is zoom in and out. There's no structure to help you navigate the space and set up. Oh, here's this part. I'm working at this level and go from level to level, so that
right.
it does not lend itself to creating. Oh, here is my space for this. Here's my area for that.
Yeah.
Creating places for yourself, um,
Yeah.
because it doesn't have, say, art boards where you define here's a part of the space where I'm doing this work and let
Hmm.
you get back and forth between things quickly. So you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. It almost discourages structuring. It
Yeah.
really doesn't make it easy to think that. And that's I've been struggling with exactly that because I'm looking for, oh, I want an area to work on this. I want an area to work on that, and I'll figure out how they fit together later.
Yeah.
So,
That makes a lot of
point,
sense.
very interesting point.
Yeah. Yeah, so I feel like kind of where we were, I guess we kind of had just described the process of, um, brainstorming, and, well, I guess moving from brainstorming to lesson creation
Mhm.
and a template that might help identify those three pieces of identifying the point, the follow-up action, and the visual structure of that lesson. Anything else you want to explore in that realm,
Not in that
or
area. So
okay?
talk about your experience with actually creating, creating the videos and the product.
Yeah. So for this version, or for the latest course, digital sketchnoting, that's where this kind of iterative process has developed, where I think with this one, even since I've been sharing these lessons on a weekly basis, I almost think that in order to, uh, you know, put a little bit of pressure on myself to produce the lessons in a timely manner rather than like procrastinating and taking longer than I need to, um, I might have even gone from once that brainstorming wall was ready. I think that's about the time in which I announced, starting in a couple of weeks, we're going to have these weekly webinar lessons. And that put the pressure on me to actually create the lessons, 2 to 3 a week, to be able to present them in those live webinar workshops. Uh, and within that version, when I was presenting them, in those live webinar workshops, um, I wasn't yet worried about the what like the final video lessons would look like. So like I didn't go through the process of recording all of the video lessons and editing all of the video lessons to be able to share them within those webinars. Instead, I focused on like finishing all of the visuals for that lesson, so like getting to the full lesson page, and then within the webinar like talking through that lesson piece by piece. So you've kind of seen that, Suzanne, in a variety of formats. I think within Procreate, I think I used the layers to be able to build up from a blank screen to a full screen. So that's what the first delivery of those lessons look like. But within GoodNotes, I had everything already on the screen. There was nothing that appeared, but because of GoodNotes kind of facilitating this top to bottom infinite scroll, what you saw me do is I just like scrolled down my page as I talked through each of the ideas that were there. A similar approach when using concepts, I had my full big mind map sketched out within concepts. And then within the lesson, I just, zoomed in and kind of panned around from one element at a time as I talked through those ideas and got to the, whatever the specific follow up action was for each of those lessons. Um, so that was the first round of presenting all of those ideas, knowing that in the next round, I would kind of take the feedback that I got and that I'm continuing to get from you and other students as I present those live. I had the opportunity to take that feedback, maybe make some small adjustments to those lessons, and worry about the recording of those final lessons as a step that comes after this first round of presenting the ideas and having conversations with you all about them. Um,
So
yeah, so that's like the live workshop version of the course.
in when you've done courses in the past, have you gone straight from creating the lesson to recording without this presenting first?
I think I've done some of both. Well, no, I think mostly I've gone straight to recording the final lesson. the couple of times when I have done this form of like a live version of it before the final lesson, I know with build an online course with sketch notes, I did something fairly similar to what we're doing now with digital sketch notes. Um, but instead of having like a big group of folks going through the course in this live version, I just reached out to three folks who I knew were interested in building their own online course. And it was just the four of us who met each week, and I shared a lesson. And yeah, that one was a little bit slower paced, but it did have this do it live first, get feedback, and then go record the final lesson. So I've done a little bit of both. Then I guess is a way to summarize that. But
And how do you feel about it now that you've kind of done a full blown, really teach it with a full cohort live before you record?
I think I will end up liking this version best, um, because of the insights that come from presenting the materials live and having the opportunity within office hours each week, but then also with the kind of immediate follow up um, after each lesson, to just identify, the questions that came up that I didn't answer within the lesson, or things about like structure or wording that maybe didn't make sense. I think that the final product, the final course, will be a lot better because of this live workshop version that we're doing.
Hmm. Hmm. Have you ever done any of them in person, or have you always done this online or aim for video?
Yeah, I haven't done full on courses in person. I've done a couple of short, more like workshop uh, versions. So, like, I think I did a 2 hour sketchnoting workshop once. Um, I guess I did do through a small college here in Portland. Um, I did, maybe it was a 4 or 5 night workshop series um, on sketchnoting, which was more or less kind of the intro course. So really, only a couple of in person. I've really been leaning into the online
Yeah.
uh, space.
So it's interesting because I'm taking a course that I've taught, a 1 day course in person, that I actually think will work better as an online, a flipped classroom type version.
Mm,
But
yeah.
I'm realizing that yes, I have refined it over time based on the questions, the input I get, but I don't capture the feedback to the level of detail that you get when you're able to record it. People
Mm,
questions and you have the chat going on. You much
yeah.
richer feedback. I have students who are helping each other, but I don't know. I'm okay. They got solved. I don't know what the problem actually was when I'm teaching in person.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that already gives you a great foundation to work from, though, that you have done it in person and
Mhm.
have gotten some level of feedback. I think that puts you in a good place to um, work with it now online too.
Mhm. Mhm. So when then you go to record. How long does that take? What's that?
Yeah. So what I think will be interesting with this, with digital sketchnoting, is that because of all of the work that I've done in preparing the lessons for the live workshop version, the I guess my hope is that the recording process is less cumbersome, because like the raw materials are all there. It's just a matter of like actually producing them. And I suppose it depends on the specific process you use. But if we look at an example and maybe think about Procreate, since I've that's the app that I've have the most experience with recording videos, And in that case, I, just use the iPad's built-in screen recorder. And then I use layers on Procreate where on one layer, I'll have the full completed finished lesson on the page. And I just kind of go back and forth between turning on that layer as a reference to remind myself of what I want to write or draw next. And then I turn that layer off and actually do the writing or drawing. Um, and I kind of go back and forth between that until I have sketched out that entire lesson while having that screen recording going.
Mhm.
And then I pull that video file, which is maybe, I guess for a 1 page lesson, that video file might be 15 to 20 minutes long, I guess, depending on the complexity. So I pull that into a video editing software. I use Adobe Premiere Pro. Uh, and then in the editing process is when I go in and I, cut out all of those times when I'm turning on the reference layer to look at that so that I'm only left with, the new marks that I make on the page. And I've got each of them as kind of like an individual clip. So each drawing is its own clip, each phrase is its own clip. And that's what I use as a reference as I record the audio narration to go along with that video. So I do separate those. Like I do the sketch noted lesson first, and then my current approach is I improvise the narration for that lesson. In the past, I have done some scripting. I think for an introduction to visual note taking, and I think also for sketchnoting in the classroom. I scripted the full lesson. Lately, I think I've been enjoying more the process of improvising the lesson, both from an efficiency and also just the like. I like the tone of delivery better when improvised rather than scripted. So there are pros and cons to going with scripted versus improvised narration.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I record that audio narration, bring that into Premiere Pro as well, and then line up the audio descriptions for each of the um, each part of the lesson, and that's where like you can adjust the speed of those clips of me drawing something or writing something. You speed them up so that they line up well with the spoken narration.
Uh-huh.
um, so to try to summarize the time commitment there for a let's say like a 8-minute video lesson, um, that's probably maybe like 4 hours of work.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, there are some ways of like batching the development process to like stay in one mode of work for longer. So you could maybe batch a unit's worth of lessons at a time just to get some efficiency going. Um, but yeah, maybe yeah, 2 to 4 hours per lesson
Per 8.
might be about right. That sounds like a lot, but that's probably pretty accurate.
That's end to end. That is that, after post edit?
Yes, that's end to end.
Yeah, that sounds normal.
Yeah, yeah. And what I like to, um, what I enjoy about creating courses online and kind of structuring them in this way is that at the end of that process that I just described, you've got this kind of succinct, efficient video sharing that particular lesson. And, if you choose to use like fill a single page on the screen for it, the final frame of that video is a really nice recap, right? Like there's a full page sketch note that's a great reference for people to look back on. Um, so wherever you're sharing this lesson, you maybe embed that video at the top of the lesson page. You can include that final image below it. But then also below the video, if when you're editing or when you're sharing it, you realize, oh, I forgot to mention this particular thing in the video, you can add that to the text below it on the lesson page.
Mhm.
Or you can, add in a checklist or a template that maybe you didn't share within the video lesson itself. There's still that opportunity to add those kind of supplemental resources even after you've finished making the video lesson itself.
Do you ever have to edit one of those lessons? Because I'm thinking the sketch that I teach is very much tools oriented. Here's learning how to use the tool, and they have sometimes a nasty habit of updating the interface every month.
Yeah,
Oftentimes, I have to go in and retake my screenshots because what the students are looking at is different than what what I did
right.
last month. Which
Yeah,
live class is not too onerous.
right, right. I haven't really done that yet. I think it is with digital sketchnoting that there's the biggest potential for that because we're talking about software. And I'm showing, all of these different apps as they exist, in the first half of 2020. But I'm sure even by the second half of this year, they'll be different. And um, in there, I would say, if there's a big enough change in what it looks like, uh, that might be a reason to re-record the lesson. But in a lot of cases, I could see just adding new screen grabs below your video lesson
Mhm.
to highlight, okay, here's what it looks like now. And, circle the things that are different compared to your video lesson. My sense is you could get by with those types of updates for quite a while without losing the value of the lesson itself.
Yeah, you could probably even do a little 30-second recording of here's some differences you might be seeing.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And just add that and
that's a great way.
to the at the start of the lesson or somewhere in there saying here.
Yeah. 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 And even with um, you know, uh on a lesson page too, you can have like multiple videos on one lesson page, right? So like you mentioned, you can keep your first lesson as is, and then right below it, here's a 2021 update
When you say
just to share.
lesson page, what are you referring to?
So there, I'm thinking about like within Mighty Networks, as folks work through the course, there's this table of contents, and there's lesson 2.1 that has its own page, and that's just like a full fledged uh, page of a website where you can embed as many videos as you want, as many images, as much text. So that's something that you can update as needed over time.
So you're using Mighty Networks for this, and I see you've got some other classes there as well. Um, Tell me about Mighty Networks and your experience using that platform. How long have you been using Mighty Networks?
Yes, we've been on Mighty Networks for just over 3 months now.
Mhm.
Uh, so June of 2020 was our third full month on this platform. I enjoy it quite a bit because of the uh, potential for interaction. And that interaction flows in a few different directions. One is between like me and students. Uh, this is a platform that encourages students to share their work um, as they work through the course. So there are different like in addition to there being this built-in course structure with like the table of contents as I described there are also like forums that you can set up essentially. Um, so it facilitates students sharing their own work and being able to like ask me questions directly. Um, but then it's also like some people have described it as it's almost like its own Facebook, but it's like a closed Facebook. So it's just folks that are like taking this course. Um, that as students share their work, they can interact with each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's been one of the benefits of using this platform, especially when building a new course, but even like indefinitely, because I'm seeing this with earlier courses as well, like the intro course maybe is, the one that folks sign up for the most frequently, even though I created all of those video lessons for that intro course 5 or 6 years ago. And it's those videos that still make up the intro course. The fact that people can sign up for it, they kind of log into this to Verbal to Visuals Mighty Network, the space that's all about sketchnoting. They work through that intro course and share the activities and their sketch notes along the way. And anyone else who has signed up for that intro course gets to see when someone else posts their work and can comment on it or like ask a question about it, or so that interaction among students is the other big thing that I enjoy about the platform. And the combined impact of all of that interaction and just deeper engagement with the material and with each other. That's kind of why I chose to transfer to Mighty Networks from what I was using prior to Mighty Networks, which was my own WordPress site with a plugin called Learn Dash, which is just like um, uh, a plugin that allows you to create online courses within in a WordPress site. And that has some, uh, I think there is the ability to do some level of like sharing and forums and things like that with something like LearnDash. But the way it's all packaged and delivered within Mighty Networks, it's just so much more of a cleaner experience than if I tried to put that together myself on my own WordPress site. Uh, so I'm really enjoying Mighty Network so far. There's a lot going on. Like you could probably speak to this in terms of it. It might be
It's a great
overwhelming at
incentive, and
first.
it's a great incentive to post your work. It's
Yeah,
always fun 'cause people are very engaged on it. So
yeah,
I find it, okay, let me throw something up.
yeah, yeah.
How much time do you spend? But you monitor all your classes. So if someone has a class for one of your the ones that are that are lessons you're not engaging personally, weekly in the webinar format, um, but you are answering questions and in the forums watching them.
Yeah, yeah. So I try to keep an eye on, I guess, pretty much anything that gets posted, and the way it looks for me, and also for any student that uh, logs into Verbal to Visuals Mighty Network from the main activity feed. They'll see all of the recent posts of any of the courses that they're a part of.
Mhm.
So if someone is like just signed up to digital sketchnoting, they're only going to see posts related to digital sketchnoting. But if they're signed up for the intro course as well, and maybe Learn in Public, also, they will see posts connected to any of those courses. So since I am, registered or a part of all of those, I kind of see every post that comes in, no matter what course it's from. So what I tend to do on a daily basis, at least Monday through Thursday, maybe, and sometimes on Friday, I try to take a look at the most recent things that have been shared, and sometimes if there is already quite a bit of community interaction from other students taking the course. Like if someone posted something new and 3 or 4 people have already like commented on it and there are some conversations going on, like sometimes I'll just I might spend less time on that compared to if I see a post that no one has interacted with yet. I might spend a little bit more time looking at that one just to, make sure that folks who do share their work uh, get some feedback on it.
Uh-huh.
And you know, uh, in a lot of cases, hearing from other students might be more helpful or more impactful than hearing from me.
Mhm.
Uh, so as long as there's some sort of interaction going on there, that's what I um, try to keep an eye out for and encourage. If it's not yet happening yet, I might try to get the uh, comment section going.
Now you've only been on Mighty Networks for 3 months, so you may not know yet. How long do you think people will stay engaged, or do you envision people staying engaged after they've gone through a course?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I think it will depend on two things, maybe. And I guess I'm, uh, brainstorming these things right now. So I think the reasons that folks might continue to stay engaged after they've finished a course, one reason that comes to mind is if that person like decides to take on a new project, like for work or a personal project, and they want to be able to kind of share their work while they're doing that project. Um, I could see this being the case for digital sketchnoting,
Mhm.
especially because of the way we've identified, the those three different applications of using it as a learning tool, as a problem solving tool, and as a storytelling tool. I could see someone 6 months from now, like, oh, I'm giving a presentation in a month. I want to use my digital sketchnoting skills to do it. I went through this course already, but while I'm preparing this presentation, I'm going to like share my process in the Mighty Network just for my own,
Mhm.
motivation and accountability, and also as an opportunity to get feedback. Um, so I see that as a reason people might continue to share and engage after they've completed it. And then the other thing that might encourage that continued engagement is something that I hope to do on a fairly regular basis, maybe a couple times a year, is just hosting like an occasional Q&A webinar or a share your work webinar,
Mhm.
like me coming in and encouraging folks to either like hop on a call together to ask questions, or just like putting a call out, hey, share whatever you've been working on this past month. um, that could encourage continued sharing and interaction as well. um, with those two things in mind, connected to specific courses, I will mention as well that I've also created within Mighty Networks, there's the ability to create groups as well, in addition to courses. So the only group that I've created so far is the verbal to visual community. And the purpose of that community is to provide the more regular, ongoing opportunities for sketchnoting, skill development, and project sharing. So within that community, we have this recurring weekly calendar where every Monday I post a question of the week, something related to that month's theme. So we identify now as a group, like a particular theme that we want to focus on for that month. Uh, Next month in July, it's going to be visual metaphors.
Mhm.
So we've got the theme for a month. On Monday, I post like a question related to that theme that folks can think about and respond to. On Wednesday, I post a sketchnoting prompt to encourage people to put their skills to use. And once a month within that community, we also have a monthly mastermind. That's a webinar chat for folks to share whatever project they're working on, get some feedback, identify some next steps. So I mentioned that just because there's a little bit of a balance that I'm trying to strike, wanting that community to be a really great place for the folks that want more ongoing interaction and accountability and a place to build their skills and share their work, even after they've completed a given course. Um, so that's what the community is for. Uh, but then within those courses, as I mentioned, with occasional webinars or calls for people to share their work, you can still, as a course creator yourself, do as much of that um, uh, encouragement for continued engagement. You can do as much of that as you would like within an individual course.
Mhm.
Um, so that's how I've been thinking about kind of continued engagement, which might have been long-winded, but I hope that all made sense.
And that's an interesting because you've got because the courses are there and there, presumably you will have new people coming in all the time. So people are at different phases in a course because it's self-paced.
Right.
So it's always active. It's not like,
Yeah.
of course, where, okay, we go through as a cohort and I may want to continue working on it, but all my classmates are now off. So even if I post in the forum, no one, they've all gone. Here you have new people coming into the course all the time.
Exactly.
Feedback
Yeah.
at that level versus
Yeah.
I am now saying I'm stepping out of this particular course context and saying I'm going to take up sketchnoting as part of my life, and I want to move into the forum and use the forum for feedback.
Right.
That's an interesting making clear to people that there is that option.
Yeah. And what's been kind of fun to see too is that and this is kind of happening already with probably mostly within the intro course, is that if someone signs up for that today, hops in, there's a within Mighty Networks, there's like a real short little like profile, little bio where you can just share, why you're here and what you want to do with your sketchnoting skills. They kind of have an opportunity to like introduce themselves, and then as they share their work from like the first unit of that intro course, um, there are other folks who have been around verbal to visual for a while, and if they happen to be logged in at the right time, they might see that um, first post from someone new and can share some comments or provide encouragement. So there's like some interaction from almost like the verbal to visual, like veterans sharing comments and encouragement with the newbies. But then it's also cool to see the newer folks as the veterans maybe share their latest work for those newer folks to say like, oh, this is so cool. I'm going to like steal this thing that you did here and use that within the thing that I'm working on. So that interaction between folks who have been a part of this uh, mighty network, this sketchnoting learning experience for different amounts of time, that's pretty fun to see. Um, and the goal, I guess, is that there's enough new folks joining and sharing and interacting in that way, combined with enough folks who have been around for a while, also still joining in and commenting on things for there to be a good balance of those types of interactions going on over time.
And I think you are a big part of that. I mean, you've created what I've felt in this course and what I can hear from the forum going on is that you created a very open, welcoming, and non-judgmental
Mm.
community. Very
Mm.
supportive, and people who wanna, they automatically put themselves in greeters. Oh, you're new here. Here, let me say hello. And
Yeah.
there's been incredible support. Some of the people are posting amazing work compared to what
Hmm.
I do, but are very encouraging for my little scribbles. And I think I'm pretty proud of this. It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
It's making progress. It's getting there. I got
Yeah.
what I needed out of it.
Hmm.
And then to be able to put that up and get positive feedback from people saying, um, I don't want to not just appreciation of it, but actually constructive feedback that there is some
Mm.
value there, right? I think
Yeah.
that's part of it. I don't know if you're familiar with. I read a book recently that was recommended is "Thanks for the Feedback." And they
Not
talk
familiar
about
with it, but it sounds great.
three different kinds of feedback. When you ask for feedback, that there is appreciation, just good job, looks great, right?
Hmm.
That if that's what you need sometimes or give, there is constructive criticism, coaching. I actually want. Don't just tell me it's good.
Hmm.
What's good? What's not
Hmm.
working? What I now need
Yeah.
I can learn from, and then there's evaluation, which is I just need to know, okay,
Hmm.
you're in the top 10%, you're on track to get that raise or whatever.
Hmm.
That when you're asking for feedback, giving feedback, making a conscious decision of understanding what are we looking for here? Which type? Do I just need a great job? Because if you're looking for coaching, what can I do better? What's not working? It's very
Hmm.
frustrating to only get great job.
Right.
And if I'm looking for, well, am I going to make it on time? I don't want you to be telling me what I could be doing differently.
Yeah.
So
No, I think
your community is really good at giving the coaching, both at giving both the appreciation and the coaching. And I think you've been a big part of setting that up.
well, thank you. It's been fun to see because I feel like I've seen that as well, like equal what has seemed like a nice balance of like encouragement where encouragement is needed, but also constructive feedback.
Hmm.
And I think part of that also comes from the way in which folks are sharing their work. Because what's nice, obviously, in addition to like posting a photo of your latest sketch note, you can provide as short or as long of a caption and description to it as you'd like. And I think folks have developed or come in with an intuitive sense or see because of the way we've been modeling it when just a bit of like encouraging words are a great way to
Hmm.
respond to that post. But lots of times people within their description of that ask for explicit feedback,
Right.
which is really helpful because then it gives those of us taking a look at it kind of a focus um, to the comments that we might add. But I appreciate you sharing that book because I think that piece about um, identifying the most helpful type of feedback, uh, that's something that I want to spend more time
Hmm.
thinking about and facilitating within this online learning environment because as you've mentioned, I think it can kind of like make or break the interactive piece of an online classroom, right?
Hmm.
It's this combo of self-paced, work through these lessons, do these activities. You'll get something out of that, but you might get just as much, if not more, out of the interactive components of it
Hmm.
if you choose to share your work and
Right.
chat with others about it. Uh,
I think,
so that
and I think that
feedback
goes
is
back
great.
to that setting up that environment goes back to your having a very clear follow up action, student action in your
Nice tie-in.
because I have a nice little piece, and for me, it's been those assignments until we got to the applications and it got more complicated, were manageable in terms of my time load. Maybe
Yes,
an hour or
that's huge.
two, I could do that. Then, oh, now I have something to post. But it was very clearly chunked that I could manage the time wise. I could finish it. Clear definition of what it was I was trying to accomplish, and it didn't take too long, so I could post something.
Yeah,
So having that
I
clear
think.
follow-up student action that is the right size, I think is
Mm,
a big part of developing a practice of posting and realizing that
yeah.
partial work, as I think we talked about this when I think someone said, "Oh, I don't know if my stuff is good enough to post," and I gave them the old designers. Your work is always great, good enough to present when you're a designer.
Absolutely.
Just it's always good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that piece. I think that this came up in a conversation a handful of weeks ago as well in terms of just facilitating the first share within like an online learning environment. We do have this advantage that it's a semi-closed, it's semi-public but also semi-private space since we're gathered here to do this specific thing, which is sketchnoting. So it's not like you're putting it out on Twitter for anyone to stumble across and comment on. So it's this safe space, which is kind of like step one, but then providing enough of a bite-sized prompt. Maybe it is
Mhm.
just like a written prompt, maybe it's a visual prompt to encourage that first act of sharing. Can go a long way in
Exactly.
getting the momentum going to continue doing
I
that
think
sharing.
too, the value of sharing that for the especially for that first share is for me in this course, I know the people I'm sharing with.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I didn't it's not a self-paced, you know, I've seen them on the Zoom screen,
Yep.
getting to know some of them, right?
Right. Right.
So it's not just, "Oh, I'm just putting it up for faceless, nameless people."
Yeah.
These are, "Oh, I recognize that name."
Right.
So
And that obviously speaks to the benefit of doing delivering a course in real time on a week to week basis
mhm,
with a cohort. Um, and I actually have a pretty good reference point. Um, when I was first getting when I first made the transition to Mighty Networks, I actually signed up for a course that Mighty Networks themselves put on called Community Design Masterclass.
mhm,
And that is let's see, I think it's about a 6 week course. Um, that's a course that they put on a recurring basis. So they don't have it set up as a standalone, purchase it and work through it at your own pace. They literally just like launch a new cohort every 6 weeks or so.
mhm,
Um, and once you've done it a handful of times, you've got all of your lesson materials there. So from an instructional standpoint, you don't have to build the course materials again because you already have it. Your job then becomes just like facilitating each of these cohorts as they go through it.
mhm.
So that's just another model that online course creators could adopt if you'd like to. Just continuing to um, do a new cohort every 2 months or 3 months or whatever the case may be, if you want to facilitate that type of connection among students that Suzanne, you just mentioned there.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask you about that because what I'm thinking with my sketch class, which is I teach as it's like a 7-hour class, but realistically, that's 2.5 hours of my demoing and then people working through, then
Mm-hmm.
working because we're trying to have them walk out. You've actually done all this stuff by the end of the day, which for an online class, I would do a flipped classroom, watch the video, and then we'll do office hour type stuff, lab hours.
Right.
So you can come ask your questions, we can solve the problems, and maybe do 2 or 3 office hours in a week, and boom, you're done. Because people want to. This is a tool people want to learn it
Mm.
fast, right?
Right.
Intensive, learn the skills, and then you can practice afterwards. So you've
Yeah.
introduced office hours on this one. What's your? I've only made it to one set of office hours,
Hmm.
but it's people. It sounds like people are receiving that well. And what's from your side? How do you think about those office hour model?
Yeah. So I have been enjoying it as well. I see it as uh, kind of just in a fairly open-ended space for Q&A. So if folks have like a specific question related to that week's lesson or previous week's lessons, to be able to share those within that more conversational setting. Because yeah, I don't show up with any prepared material. I just say, hey, welcome, who's got a question they want to bring in.
Mhm,
So it's an opportunity to continue identifying the questions that come up in response to a given lesson. So for me, that will help in the next iteration of development, potentially addressing some of those questions in the lesson itself. But it's also an opportunity for folks to share their work and maybe get some feedback on it or identify like uh, a challenge where they maybe like don't know how they want to sketch out this particular thing, or they're not sure how they want to use this Zoom tool or this Canvas, whatever it might be. Um, so I feel like that has created a more open space for questions to come up and work to be shared that uh, I and others might not have seen if that space didn't exist. Um, People still might have been, sharing their work uh, by posting a photo within Mighty Networks or asking a question somewhere in like a forum, but having a place for conversations to occur and a little bit of like ping ponging back and forth. Because I feel like most recently, especially, I don't even have to like hop in to keep the conversation going because one person will mention something and then another person will come in and be like, "Oh, that reminds me of this," and like uh, the conversations and ideas flow pretty naturally in a way that would be hard to recreate in a asynchronous communication environment.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's kind of the role that I've seen office hours playing, and I think speaks to the um, almost like to some degree there are different like value propositions that you can put out there as a course creator depending on like which model of lesson delivery you're going for. um, with digital sketchnoting it's a little bit of a hybrid because I know that I'm getting toward the place where it's going to be a standalone work through at your own pace course,
Mhm.
which obviously will have a lot of value to it. I think the argument could be made that this live version with office hours and this cohort, there's a higher value proposition there because of just that level of engagement and interaction.
Mhm.
So that's something to think about when it comes to pricing what you're creating. Um,
Right. Have you thought about office hours for your other courses, doing even the self-paced, once a month or once a saying you have office hours for people who are taking those courses?
yeah, I think if I were to do regular office hours within those courses, I would probably want to change the pricing model
Uh-huh.
because of the ongoing time commitment from me.
Mhm.
Uh, I think I like the current model of my courses being this like one time fee. Uh, you get all these materials to work through, and you have this fairly engaging platform to share your work and connect with others.
Mhm.
Um, and then leaning in on the community as the place to go if you really want like ongoing connection. I kind of want to direct folks that want that, direct them to the community because that has a monthly or annual subscription model to
Uh-huh.
it.
Uh-huh.
So that's where kind of like
So
the
you
value proposition comes in there for that community.
Right, and you do engage with that community. So you're basically moving that office hour model over into, if you want that, then you move into the community
Yeah,
model.
yeah.
That's fair
Essentially,
enough.
that's the
Yeah.
idea. Um, and like with that said, that community being the best place for all of that ongoing conversations and webinars and things like that. I do still like to do occasional Q&A webinars connected to each of those courses.
Mhm.
Um, so I do want to keep up with that, but it will be on a much more infrequent basis, like maybe once or twice a year
Right.
for each of those courses. So it's an occasional thing, but not necessarily something that like folks can count on
Right.
in the way that they could count on those
And I
things always being within the community.
and I would imagine that occasional annual, that's as much a check-in for you on, is there anything you need to change in that course? Has anything changed as it is as
Yeah,
you're taking it?
right. Yeah, I like to use those. Uh, yeah, to identify, like you mentioned, um, new questions that I could maybe address in one place within that course or another. But then I also view them as looking out for potential topics to explore in a
Mhm.
weekly YouTube video, since like that's what my marketing looks like for my courses. It's pretty much the uh, YouTube videos and now this podcast with conversations like these. Um, so that's just another space to address questions that might come up within a Q&A connected to a course.
Mhm.
Sometimes if it feels like uh, one that would fit well for a YouTube video, that's just another space to address specific questions. And then I can even like link that public video from, a specific course lesson page where that question might come up. Um,
Mhm. And ideas, as you said, initially, ideas for new classes or things that people are thinking
mm,
about. Well,
yeah,
tell me a little
yeah,
bit about how do you find people? You were just talking a little bit about marketing, and you've built up quite a following. Uh,
yeah.
you sound kind of
So,
surprised.
yeah, well, I think it's
How
been,
do people find your course?
yeah, I think those two things actually that I just mentioned have been it. And particularly the YouTube channel, since that's been the longest running location where I've been sharing work regularly. Uh, so I think starting in 2014, 2015, pretty much right after I launched Verbal to Visual, I realized that the video format was one that I wanted to focus on. And that's when I began this more or less weekly series. Like sometimes I miss a week here or there. And I guess there was a period of time when I was doing more than one a week. Um, but over the years, I've addressed enough questions related to sketchnoting
Uh-huh.
that folks might search for, and also just used sketchnoting as a way to share interesting ideas. Like I did a visual summary of the book Essentialism.
Mhm.
I share a lot of like work from Todd Henry, who's got a podcast that I enjoy. Um, I've shared things from like Tim Ferriss and Elizabeth Gilbert, and uh, so my approach with those videos has been some sort of a balance between addressing questions that sketchnoters have
Mhm.
and just highlighting interesting ideas that I enjoy and that people might end up searching for. That whether they're googling something about sketchnoting, eventually they'll probably make it to one of my videos and then might explore the channel. And then since I mentioned my courses and pretty much the end of every single video, that's how they might make their way to a course.
Uh-huh.
Or they might Google something like, what is essentialism, or how to set goals, or, something topical like that, that maybe I've addressed in a visual way in one of my videos. That might be their entry point into sketchnoting.
Uh-huh.
And if if that form of working with idea resonates with them, they might go down the rabbit hole and make their way to a course.
So your marketing really consists of the YouTube and the podcast work you do. Getting
Yeah.
there. You don't do other marketing.
Yeah, no, I haven't done any paid marketing.
Uh-huh.
Um, and yeah, so far I like that.
Good.
I mean, there's a potential that I'm leaving money on the table by not diving into paid marketing, but it just hasn't really interested me. So I've
And it seems like
chosen
you're
not
doing
to
well
spend my
enough.
time there. Yeah, it seems to the kind of slow but steady
Mhm.
organic growth
Mhm.
that I guess is kind of the underlying purpose of a content marketing strategy. I've been pretty happy with that.
Good. So we're at half an hour over. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
So tell me what you've developed what seems a pretty engaging lifestyle for yourself.
Hmm.
What do you find most exciting? What's
Hmm. Good question. Um, I think so. This speaks to generally what I enjoy about sketchnoting and choosing to make sketchnoting the like overarching theme to my work is that it can follow my interests wherever they go. Um, so for much of the last 5 years, a lot of the topics that I've been sketchnoting have been around kind of like creativity and entrepreneurship, since like those are the skills and the work that I've been spending time on. Um, but now, I guess moving into a little bit more of a um, building a home and growing roots perspective. Like I've always been interested for a long time in building with cob. I don't know if you're familiar with this like
No.
natural building material, but you can make these really cool like you can build an entire uh, cottage. Like you can build homes out of cob. You can build like fireplaces and ovens. Uh, it's just a natural building material. That's a combination of sand, straw, and clay. And like on my list of things to do this summer is to build a cob fireplace in our backyard. So like knowing that I can use sketchnoting as a tool to learn about how to use that material, and also kind of like plan out the stages of building those things. I love that sketchnoting is a tool that can follow my interests in that area. And now with things going on in the world, like wanting to spend more time on social justice related issues and um, learn more about anti-racism and make sure that I am taking action in those directions, and potentially like through YouTube and sharing ideas and books and other people like help spread those important ideas as well. I think those are the things that um, excite me as I think about where uh, to go next with these skills. And as I'm doing that, what's fun to now have like an education environment, um, just to be able to share what I'm learning from those experiences with folks like you and anyone watching the YouTube videos or engaging within like the online classroom environment, uh, to be able to pull from those personal experiences, um, and share sketchnoting related things with others who have got their own interesting projects and work going on. That creates this kind of exciting feedback loop where I'm excited about the way in which I'm using those skills personally, but then also sharing those approaches and seeing what others are doing with their sketchnoting skills. It just provides like this motivating feedback loop that uh, I hope we keep in place and kind of keeps growing over time.
Yep. So I think that sounds like a great closing statement for you. I mean, it really is a advertisement for sketchnoting, or a tagline for
Mm,
sketchnoting is sketchnoting as this tool and medium for pursuing your own interests, and being able to share them gives you a tool for sharing them with others.
yeah,
Like that's
I
what
like
it
that.
is. It's just that's what sketchnoting's doing for me. I can figure out what I'm interested in and share it with others.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I like that.
well, thank you very much. It's been really interesting.
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne. You've got brought a lot of good questions in here. I feel like you were the host and I was the guest on this
That was my
podcast,
goal.
which I hope you it was helpful for
Well,
you.
definitely gave me a lot to think about. I'm just doing this as you know. I'm trying to start a creative crisis leadership. This whole
Yeah,
nonprofit thing. Um, so the sketch class is I need to make money. I need income.
right.
So I'm not looking to build up a whole thing, but it turns out it's a valued skill,
Hmm.
and one that I keep talking to people. Like now I've had some former students call me and said, I don't really understand this sketch problem, and they realize they're not using the tool at all effectively.
Mm.
It's just, this is, So many people out there are not using the power of the tool.
Right.
So
Well, yeah, it
there's
sounds
a
like
market,
there's an opportunity.
right? There's a market, and there's another tool called Figma that's basically the same thing but an online version. So, which
Hmm.
is becoming very popular. So there is this huge opportunity, and if I can set it up as you say, a self-paced, I would even be thinking of doing a 1-week cohort where you have self-paced. You watch the videos. I'll do two office hours or something, because it is the opportunity to ask questions of someone, an expert with the tool,
Yes.
skills class.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's completely viable. And with an online format, you get people from all over.
Hmm.
You're not limited to the people who can come in person. But I'm doing it for the money, realistically. I enjoy
Yeah. Well, that's
teaching,
important.
but income. So
Yeah.
it's finding that balance. How do you attract people and build something up? And I like your whole. You actually changed. I had been thinking, oh, let me sit down and basically create a course out of what I've got. I like your strategy of go through it online
Hmm.
once with an interactive and get where I'm specifically asking for feedback.
Yeah.
As a practitioner,
Yeah.
how do we do this online? Adjust. Does 3 days? If we do it, I do it as a 1-week cohort. Yeah, you meet. Here's the videos you're supposed to watch, and how many days do you need? How much time do you need?
Hmm. Hmm.
As I say, normally it's a 1-day thing, so you space it out over a couple of days for people. But anyway, so that's very helpful. Really, really interesting.
Thanks again for chatting. I'm looking forward to
Thank you.
sharing this one because I know a bunch of others have similar questions to what you posed today.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's good to explore these.
very interesting. Thank you so much.
I hope that you enjoyed that conversation and that it gave you a good sense both for how I approach the creation of an online course, the building of an online learning community, and also that it gave you some ideas about what you might create. Maybe merging your sketchnoting skills with your experience in a given topic to help others build their skills in meaningful ways. If you haven't yet seen Verbal to Visual's online learning environment, but would like to check it out, you can find those resources at verbaltovisual.com. If you're newer to sketchnoting, I recommend starting with one of the online courses, maybe an introduction to visual note taking or digital sketchnoting. And then if you're maybe an intermediate or advanced sketchnoter, you might be more interested in the community, a place to continue growing and applying your skills, and a place for some regular accountability to help you continue making progress on whatever work you're applying your sketchnoting skills toward. And keep in mind that with the purchase of one of our courses or by joining the Verbal to Visual community, you get access to one-on-one coaching calls like what you just heard. You can find more info at verbaltovisual.com and add a /11 to get to the show notes for this specific episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to sharing another conversation with you next time. Until then.